The signal came at 3 in the morning, Earth Standard Time. It traveled across 4,000 light-years of empty space before reaching the communication array orbiting Mars. The message was weak and broken, filled with static and desperate words in an alien language. Admiral Katie Vance was sleeping in her quarters aboard the USV Ironclad when her personal communicator began to buzz. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling for a moment before reaching for the device. The face of her communications officer appeared on the small screen. "Admiral, we have received a distress signal. It is from the Valari homeworld." Katie sat up in her bed. The Valari were a peaceful species that lived on the far edge of known space. They were small creatures with delicate bodies and wings like insects. The Galactic Council considered them a minor civilization, too weak to matter in the grand politics of the universe. "Send the signal to my ready room," Katie said. "I will be there in 5 minutes." She dressed quickly and walked through the quiet corridors of her ship. The Ironclad was a heavy battlecruiser, one of the largest vessels in the human fleet. It carried a crew of 800 men and women, all of them trained for combat in the most dangerous environments imaginable. The ready room was a small space next to the bridge. Katie entered and activated the main display screen. The distress signal played automatically, and she listened to the translated words with growing concern. "This is Elder Cherith of the Valari High Council. Our world is under attack. The Keth Dominion has invaded our system. They are killing our people and taking survivors as slaves. We have sent requests for help to the Galactic Council, but no one has responded. We are dying. Please, if anyone can hear this message, we need help. We cannot fight them alone." The message repeated 3 times before ending. Katie stood in silence, thinking about what she had just heard. The Keth Dominion was a cruel empire that conquered weak civilizations and sold their populations into slavery. They were feared across the galaxy, and most species chose to look away when they attacked. The door opened behind her. Commander Nathan Cole entered the room, his uniform slightly wrinkled from hasty dressing. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served with Katie for 15 years through countless battles and missions. "I heard about the signal," Nathan said. "Have you contacted the Council?" "Not yet," Katie replied. "But I already know what they will say." She was right. When she opened the channel to the Galactic Council headquarters an hour later, the response was exactly what she expected. A thin alien with blue skin and 3 eyes appeared on the screen. He was a Tarathi diplomat, one of the oldest species in the Council. "Admiral Vance, we have received your inquiry regarding the Valari distress signal. The Council has discussed this matter and determined that intervention is not possible. The Keth Dominion controls a large fleet in that sector. Any rescue attempt would require significant military resources and would likely result in heavy losses. No Council species has volunteered to lead such a mission." "So you will do nothing," Katie said. It was not a question. The diplomat shifted uncomfortably. "The Council does not have the military capability to challenge the Keth directly. We must consider the safety of our own populations. The Valari are members of your Council. They pay taxes and follow your laws. Does that mean nothing?" "Admiral, please understand our position. The Valari are a minor species with limited strategic value. The cost of saving them would be too high." Katie ended the call without saying goodbye. She turned to Nathan, who had been listening from the corner of the room. "Prepare the shock fleet," she said. "We are going to Valara Prime." Nathan nodded slowly. "The Council will not approve this mission. Earth Command might have concerns as well." "I know, but I'm not asking for permission." The news spread quickly through the human military network. Admiral Vance was assembling a fleet to rescue an alien species that most humans had never heard of. She was doing this without Council approval, without guarantee of success, And without any promise of reward, volunteers came forward immediately. Captains requested transfer to her command. Pilots canceled leave to join the mission. Engineers worked through the night to prepare ships for departure. Within 48 hours, Katie had assembled 12 warships and over 6,000 personnel. Earth Command sent her a message expressing concern about the political consequences of her actions. She read it once and deleted it. The Galactic Council sent her a formal warning that humanity would face sanctions if the mission proceeded. She ignored that too. On the morning of departure, Katie stood on the bridge of the ironclad and looked at the stars through the main viewport. Her crew worked quietly at their stations, checking systems and running final calculations. Nathan stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back. "The fleet is ready, Admiral," he said. "All ships report green status." Katie nodded. "Open a channel to all vessels." Her voice echoed through 12 ships as she spoke. "This is Admiral Vance. In a few minutes, we will enter hyperspace and begin our journey to Valara Prime. The Council has told us that this mission is too dangerous. They have told us that the Valari are not worth saving. They have told us to stay home and mind our own business." She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. "But we are human. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions. We survived predators and plagues and our own terrible mistakes. We are still here because we learned to fight for each other, even when the odds were against us." Her voice grew stronger. "The Valari are asking for help. They are dying while the rest of the galaxy watches and does nothing. I will not accept that. I will not stand by while innocent people are slaughtered and enslaved. If that makes us dangerous, then so be it. If that makes us monsters, then the galaxy can fear us. But I would rather be a monster who saves lives than a civilized creature who lets them die." She took a breath. "All ships engage hyperspace drives. We have a long journey ahead of us and a lot of work to do when we arrive. Let us show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do." The stars stretched into lines of light as the fleet jumped into hyperspace. Behind them, the solar system grew small and distant. Ahead of them, 4,000 light years away, a dying species waited for help that had finally come. Katie Vance sat in her command chair and watched the swirling colors of hyperspace through the viewport. She did not know what they would find at Valara Prime. She did not know how many of her people would die in the coming battle. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that she was doing the right thing. That was enough. The journey through hyperspace took 11 days. During that time, Admiral Katie Vance held daily briefings with her officers. They studied everything the human database contained about the Keth Dominion. They reviewed maps of the Valari system. They planned attack strategies and backup plans for the backup plans. On the 12th day, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valara system. What they found was worse than anything they had imagined. The planet below was burning. Great clouds of smoke rose from the surface, visible even from orbit. Debris fields floated in space around them, the remains of destroyed civilian ships. Encircling the world like hungry animals were 23 Keth warships. Lieutenant Commander Ben Hardy sat at the tactical station on the bridge of the ironclad. His screens showed him everything he needed to know about the enemy fleet. "Admiral, I count 15 destroyers, 6 cruisers, and 2 heavy carriers. They have us outnumbered almost 2 to 1. Katie studied the display without expression. "What about their positions?" "They are spread out around the planet. It looks like they are running patrol routes, probably hunting for survivors trying to escape." Commander Nathan Cole stepped closer to the Admiral. "If we attack now, we can catch them by surprise. They are not expecting anyone to come." Katie shook her head. "We need to know what is happening on the surface first. If there are survivors, we need to reach them before the Keth figure out we are here. She turned to her communications officer. Send a tight beam signal to the surface. Use the same frequency as the original distress call. See if anyone responds. The signal went out and vanished into the chaos below. For several long minutes, there was only silence. Then, through the static and interference, a weak voice answered. This is Elder Chirith. Is someone there? Please, is someone there? Katie leaned forward in her chair. Elder Chirith, this is Admiral Katie Vance of the United Earth Fleet. We received your distress signal. We are here to help. The silence that followed lasted so long that Katie thought the connection had failed. Then she heard a sound that needed no translation. It was the sound of crying. You came, Chirith whispered. After all this time, someone actually came. We came, Katie confirmed. Now tell me what you need. The situation on the ground was desperate. The Keth had landed troops across the planet 2 months ago. They had destroyed every major city and killed millions of Valari in the first week. The survivors had fled underground, hiding in tunnels and caves and anywhere else they could find. The Keth hunted them constantly, dragging captives back to their ships for transport to the slave markets. Chirith and approximately 40,000 survivors were hiding in a network of tunnels beneath an old industrial complex. They had some food and water, but their supplies were running low. The Keth had discovered their location 3 days ago and were digging toward them. They would break through within 48 hours. Katie listened to all of this and made her decision quickly. We are sending rescue teams to your position. Hold on a little longer. Help is coming. She ended the call and turned to her officers. I want dropships loaded and ready to launch in 1 hour. Marines, medical teams, and as many supplies as we can carry. Nathan, you will coordinate the orbital battle. Keep those Keth ships away from our landing zone. Nathan nodded. And you, Admiral? I am going down with the first wave. Her officers exchanged worried looks, but no one tried to stop her. They knew their admiral well enough to understand that arguing was pointless. 1 hour later, 12 dropships launched from the ironclad and began their descent toward Valar Prime. The Keth noticed them immediately. Warning sirens echoed through enemy ships as they scrambled to respond. But Nathan Cole had positioned the human fleet perfectly. Before the Keth could reach the dropships, human weapons opened fire. Space around Valara Prime erupted into chaos. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked between ships. Explosions lit up the darkness. The human fleet was outnumbered, but they fought with a ferocity that stunned the Keth commanders. These strange creatures from the quarantine world seemed to have no fear of death. Down below, the dropships punched through the atmosphere and landed in a field of ash and rubble near the industrial complex. Admiral Vance was the first one out, her boots hitting the ground of an alien world for the first time in her career. The air was thick with smoke and chemicals that made her eyes water, but she ignored the discomfort and started walking. Sergeant Lisa Trent led the Marine squad that accompanied her. Lisa was a young woman with short brown hair and a face that seemed permanently calm, even in the worst situations. She had served in 3 previous combat deployments and had earned a reputation as someone who never panicked. Admiral, the tunnel entrance should be about 200 meters north, Lisa said, checking her scanner. I am detecting Keth life signs nearby. Looks like a patrol. Katie drew her sidearm. Then we go through them. The patrol consisted of 6 Keth soldiers. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms, each one holding a weapon. They saw the humans coming and opened fire immediately, their energy weapons scorching the air. The humans did not slow down. They advanced through the enemy fire, their armor absorbing hits that would have killed most species instantly. Lisa dropped 2 Keth with precise shots to the head. The other Marines took down the rest in seconds. The whole fight lasted less than a minute. When they reached the tunnel entrance, they found it sealed with a heavy metal door. Katie knocked on it 3 times and spoke loudly. "Elder Chirith, this is Admiral Vance. We are here." The door opened slowly. Behind it stood a creature unlike anything the humans had seen before. Chirith was small, barely reaching Katie's waist. She had a thin body covered in iridescent scales, 4 delicate wings folded against her back, and large compound eyes that reflected the light from human flashlights. She looked up at the humans standing before her. These creatures were huge and terrifying, covered in armor and carrying weapons. They had walked through fire and poison and enemy soldiers to reach her. By every standard Chirith knew, they should be monsters. But when Sergeant Lisa Trent knelt down to meet her eyes and extended a gloved hand, Chirith saw something unexpected. She saw kindness. "Sorry we took so long," Lisa said with a small smile. "Traffic was bad." Chirith did not understand the joke, but she understood the warmth behind it. She reached out with her own small hand and touched the human's fingers. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for coming." Behind her, thousands of Valari survivors emerged from the tunnels. They were thin and scared, and many of them were injured. They looked at the human soldiers with a mixture of fear and wonder. Admiral Vance surveyed the crowd and began giving orders. "Set up a medical station here. Start processing the wounded first. Get supply crates distributed to everyone who can carry them. We need to move these people to the dropships as quickly as possible." She looked up at the smoke-filled sky, where distant flashes of light marked the ongoing space battle. "We do not have much time. Let us get to work." The rescue of Valara Prime had begun. Warlord Draxus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide, and watched his tactical displays with growing confusion. The battle was not going the way it should. His fleet outnumbered the enemy almost 2 to 1. His ships were larger and carried more weapons. By every calculation, the humans should have retreated or surrendered hours ago. Instead, they were still fighting. "Report," Draxus commanded, his voice deep and rough. His tactical officer, a young Keth named Vorath, looked up from his console. "Warlord, we have destroyed 2 enemy vessels and damaged 3 others. But our own losses are significant. 4 destroyers gone, 2 cruisers heavily damaged. The humans are not fighting like any species we have encountered before." Draxus growled low in his throat. He had heard stories about the Deathworlders from the quarantine planet called Earth. The Galactic Council had warned everyone to stay away from them. They were supposed to be primitive savages from a world of endless violence. But savages did not build warships like these. Savages did not coordinate fleet tactics with such precision. Savages did not keep fighting when they should be running away. "Show me the ground battle," Draxus ordered. The main display changed to show footage from Keth soldiers on the surface. What Draxus saw made his blood turn cold. A group of humans was moving through a chemical processing facility. The air inside was filled with toxic gases that would kill a Keth in seconds. The humans were walking through it with simple breathing masks, their bodies apparently unaffected by the poison. One soldier reported that he had shot a human 3 times with his energy weapon. The human had fallen down, gotten back up, and then killed him with a single punch to the head. The strength required to do such a thing was beyond anything in Keth biology. Another report showed humans operating in the ruins of a collapsed building. The temperature inside was extreme, hot enough to cause fatal heat stroke in most species. The humans were sweating heavily but still working, pulling Valari survivors from the rubble and carrying them to safety. "What are these creatures?" Vorath whispered. Drax, as had studied the intelligence files on humanity. He knew the basic facts. Earth was a high-gravity world with extreme temperatures and a toxic atmosphere. It was filled with predators and natural disasters. The creatures that evolved there had to be strong and adaptable. just to survive. But knowing these facts and seeing them in action were very different things. On the surface, Captain Chris Lang was leading his platoon through the industrial district. Their mission was to clear a path between the tunnel complex and the landing zone. Keth soldiers stood in their way. Chris was a big man with broad shoulders and a quiet voice. He did not like to talk much, but he was very good at his job. He had been fighting since he was 18 years old, first on Earth and then on a dozen different worlds. Nothing scared him anymore. "Contact ahead," his point man reported. 20 Keth, fortified position. Chris studied the enemy through his scope. They were dug in behind barricades, covering the only road wide enough for the evacuation vehicles. Going around would take too long. Going through would be bloody. Options? He asked his sergeant. Sergeant Pete Morrison scratched his chin. "We could flank them through that factory on the left. The Keth probably did not enter it. Air quality in there is pretty bad." Chris checked his environmental scanner. The factory was filled with chlorine gas at levels that would cause permanent lung damage in most species. For humans, it would be uncomfortable but survivable. "Good enough," Chris said. "First squad with me through the factory. Second squad keeps them busy from the front." They moved quickly. Second squad opened fire on the Keth position, drawing their attention. Meanwhile, Chris led first squad into the abandoned factory. The chlorine burned his eyes and throat, but he pushed forward. His soldiers followed without hesitation. They emerged behind the Keth barricade like ghosts from a nightmare. The enemy soldiers turned to face them, shock visible in their body language. They had assumed the factory was impassable. The fight was short and brutal. Human soldiers at close range were devastating. They were stronger, faster, and far more aggressive than Keth troops. Within 3 minutes, the barricade was clear. Chris stepped over the bodies and waved for the evacuation vehicles to proceed. His eyes were red and watering from the chlorine exposure. He would need medical treatment later. But for now, there was more work to do. Back in orbit, Warlord Draxus received report after report of similar incidents. Humans surviving conditions that should have killed them. Humans fighting through injuries that would have disabled Keth warriors. Humans doing things that seemed physically impossible. "Warlord," Vorath said carefully, "perhaps we should reconsider our position. These creatures are not like anything in our experience. The cost of defeating them may be higher than the value of the Valari slaves." Draxus turned to look at his officer. In the Keth Dominion, suggesting retreat was often punished with death. But Vorath had been with him for many years and had earned the right to speak honestly. "You think we should run," Draxus said. "I think we should survive. The Galactic Council quarantined Earth for a reason. We ignored that warning. Now we are paying the price." Draxus looked back at the tactical display. His fleet was still larger than the human force. He could probably win this battle if he committed fully. But how many ships would he lose? How many soldiers would die? And what would happen when Earth learned that the Keth had killed their people? The Deathworlders did not forget. They did not forgive. If he destroyed this fleet, a larger one would come. And then another. And another. Until the Keth Dominion itself was burning. "No," Draxus said finally. "We will not retreat. That would show weakness to the other slave species we control. They would think we can be challenged." He straightened his posture and made his decision. "Send reinforcements. Contact the home fleet and request the Annihilator. If the humans want to fight, we will give them one they will never forget." The message went out across the stars. 3 days later, a massive shadow emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. It was a dreadnought, the largest warship the Keth had ever built. Its hull was covered in weapons. Its engines glowed with terrible power. On the bridge of the ironclad, Admiral Katie Vance watched the new arrival appear on her screens. Nathan Cole stood beside her, his face pale. "Admiral, that ship is twice the size of anything we have. Our weapons might not even scratch its armor." Katie studied the dreadnought for a long moment. She thought about her fleet, battered and tired from days of fighting. She thought about the Valari survivors still waiting for evacuation on the surface. She thought about all the things that could go wrong. Then she smiled. "Well," she said quietly, "I guess we will have to try something creative." Nathan looked at her with a mixture of worry and admiration. He had seen that smile before. It usually meant someone was about to do something very stupid and very brave. "What do you have in mind?" he asked. Katie turned away from the display. "Get me Sergeant Trent. I have a special mission for her." The real battle was about to begin. The war entered its second month. Earth was burning, but Earth was still fighting. The Global Defense Coalition had formed in the first week of the conflict. Every nation on the planet had joined. Old enemies now fought side by side. Countries that had pointed nuclear weapons at each other for decades now shared soldiers and supplies. For the first time in human history, the species was truly united. Lieutenant Nicole Sanders had become a symbol of this unity. She was a pilot who had shot down more Valorian craft than anyone else alive. Her face was on posters and bunkers across the world. Children drew pictures of her plane. Soldiers wrote her name on their helmets for luck. Nicole did not care about fame. She cared about killing aliens. She had lost her family in the first attack on Los Angeles. Her parents, her sister, and her young nephew had all died when a Valorian ship bombarded the city. She had not cried. She had not mourned. She had simply climbed into her jet and started fighting. Her squadron flew missions every day, sometimes twice a day. They attacked Valorian ground positions, shot down drones, and occasionally engaged the larger ships. Most pilots lasted a week before they were killed. Nicole had survived 2 months. Some people said she was blessed. Others said she was too angry to die. Dr. Adam Clark was fighting a different kind of war. He was a weapons engineer who had been working on shield technology when the invasion began. Now he worked in an underground lab, studying captured Valorian equipment. The transport ship that Commander Eric Tanner had captured was a treasure of alien technology. Adam spent weeks taking it apart, learning how Valorian shields and weapons worked. He discovered that their shields operated on a specific frequency. If humans could match that frequency, they could punch through the shields like they were not there. He built a prototype weapon in 3 weeks. It was ugly and unreliable, but it worked. The first time they tested it on a captured Valorian drone. The drone exploded like it had been hit by a missile instead of a small bullet. Within a month, the new weapons were being produced in factories across the world. Human soldiers finally had a way to hurt Valorian ships. The balance of power began to shift. The Carrick's Dominion watched from the shadows. Rex, the scout Jake Morrison had befriended, sent regular reports to the Dominion leadership. They had seen many species fight the Valorians. None had lasted this long. None had caused this much damage. The Dominion began to mobilize. They were not ready for open war, but they could not ignore what was happening on Earth. If humans could actually defeat the Valorians, everything would change. The collective's power depended on fear. If one species could beat them, others would try. Back on the Valorian command ship, High Overseer Drain was losing his patience. His officers brought him reports of defeat after defeat. Supply lines were disrupted. Ground forces were being ambushed. Ships were being destroyed by weapons that should not exist. He blamed Ambassador Thyra Voss for the failures. He said she had been too soft, too diplomatic. She had given humans time to prepare. If she had simply attacked immediately, none of this would have happened. Thyra did not argue. She knew Dran was looking for someone to blame. But she also knew something he did not. She had been studying humans. She had read their history, their literature, their philosophy. She had come to understand something about this strange species. Humans did not fight because they thought they would win. They fought because they could not imagine doing anything else. Surrender was not in their nature. It never had been. Even their own history was filled with examples of small groups fighting against impossible odds, not because they expected victory, but because fighting was who they were. She tried to tell Drayan this. She tried to explain that humans were different from other species. But Drayan did not listen. He had conquered too many worlds to believe that a primitive species could truly threaten him. He decided to end the war with the greatest weapon in the Valorian arsenal. It was called the Stellar Lance. It was a planet killer, a weapon that could crack a world in half. The Valorians had used it 3 times in their history, always as a last resort. Drayan decided that Earth deserved nothing less. The Stellar Lance was a massive satellite that had to be assembled in orbit. It would take 48 hours to power up. Once activated, it would fire a beam of pure energy at Earth's core. The planet would be destroyed in seconds. Drayan announced his plan to his officers. Most of them agreed. Earth had become too dangerous to harvest. Better to destroy it completely and send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Resistance meant extinction, but not everyone agreed. A young Valorian soldier named Valen had been stationed on Earth during the ground campaign. He had seen things that changed him. He had seen human parents shielding their children with their own bodies. He had seen wounded soldiers refusing to retreat because their friends were still fighting. He had seen ordinary people with no training and no weapons, throwing themselves at Valorian troops to buy others time to escape. He had expected to find animals on Earth. Instead, he had found people. People who loved, who dreamed, who fought for each other with a ferocity that took his breath away. He could not be part of their destruction. Valen deserted. He stole a shuttle and flew to the human lines, broadcasting a surrender signal. He was captured, interrogated, and eventually brought to Captain Jake Morrison. Jake expected the alien to beg for mercy. Instead, Valen gave him something far more valuable. He gave him the complete specifications of the Stellar Lance, its location, its weaknesses, and exactly how long humanity had before it was activated. 48 hours. That was all the time they had. Jake immediately sent the information to Admiral Cruz. The Admiral called an emergency meeting. They had less than 2 days to destroy a weapon that could end their world. It seemed impossible. But then again, so had everything else in this war. Ambassador Thyra Voss made her own decision that night. She contacted Dr. Lisa Grant through a secret channel. She told Lisa about the Stellar Lance. She told her where it was weak. She told her that she would help from the inside. Lisa asked why. Thyra paused for a long moment. Then she said that she had spent centuries watching species die. She was tired of death. She was tired of being the instrument of extinction. The clock was ticking. 48 hours until the end of the world. And for the first time, humanity had allies among the stars. The final battle began at midnight. Every human ship that could fly gathered behind the moon. There were only 37 of them. The Valorian fleet had hundreds. By any reasonable calculation, the humans had no chance. But humans had never been reasonable. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Starward Pioneer, looking at the faces of his crew. They were tired. They were scared. But they were ready. He gave a short speech. He told them that whatever happened tonight, humanity would remember them. They were fighting for every person on Earth. They were fighting for the future. Then he gave the order to attack. The human fleet emerged from behind the moon like a swarm of angry hornets. They were joined by 12 Carrack ships that had arrived just hours before. Rex was commanding one of them. The Dominion had finally decided to act. If Earth fell, they would be next. The Valorians were waiting. Their ships formed a wall between the humans and the stellar lance. Overseer Drain watched from his command deck with confidence. He had seen the enemy numbers. He knew they were outmatched. This would be a slaughter. He was right. But the slaughter did not go the way he expected. The human ships did not attack the Valorian warships. They ignored them completely. Instead, they flew straight toward the stellar lance, dodging enemy fire with maneuvers that should have been impossible. Human pilots pushed their ships beyond every safety limit. Some of them burned out their engines. Some of them flew into enemy fire deliberately, creating openings for others. Lieutenant Nicole Sanders led the assault wing. Her squadron was down to 8 pilots from an original 30. They flew into the thickest enemy fire, drawing attention away from the main fleet. One by one, her pilots were shot down. She kept flying. On Earth, General Katie Lawson coordinated a ground assault on Valorian positions worldwide. The goal was simple: cause as much chaos as possible. Keep the enemy distracted. Every Valorian soldier looking at the ground was not looking at the sky. Her forces attacked with everything they had. Tanks, planes, soldiers, and civilians fought side by side. Cities that had been under Valorian occupation rose up in rebellion. The streets ran with blood, but the Valorians could not focus on anything. Back in space, Dr. Adam Clark was on a small shuttle heading directly for the stellar lance. He carried a device of his own creation. It was a virus designed to infect the Valorian network and disable their communications. If it worked, the Valorian fleet would lose coordination. Their greatest advantage would become their greatest weakness. Thera Voss was waiting for him. She had disabled the internal defenses of the section where Adam needed to plant the virus. When he arrived, she guided him through the massive structure to the central processing unit. Adam asked her why she was helping. Thyra looked at him with ancient, tired eyes. She said that she had lived for a very long time. She had done terrible things. She wanted just once to do something good. Adam planted the virus. It spread through the Valorian network in seconds. Across the fleet, ship captains suddenly could not communicate with each other. Weapon systems went offline. Navigation failed. The perfect Valorian coordination collapsed into chaos. Jake Morrison saw his chance. He led the remaining human and Carrick ships in a direct assault on the stellar lance. The weapon was nearly charged. They had minutes left. Sergeant Ryan Mitchell was with Jake. They had assembled a strike team of the best soldiers Earth had to offer. Their job was to board the stellar lance and destroy it from within. The boarding was brutal. Valorian guards fought desperately to stop them. Ryan lost half his team in the first corridor, but they kept pushing forward. They had no choice. Jake reached the command center first. High Overseer Drain was waiting for him. The ancient Valorian looked at Jake with a mixture of hatred and confusion. He asked how this was possible. How could such a primitive species cause so much damage? How could humans fight like this? Jake raised his weapon. He thought about everything humanity had survived. The ice ages, the plagues, the wars, every disaster that should have ended them. He thought about his wife and daughter, waiting on Earth, hoping he would come home. He said that humans have been fighting since before they could walk upright. They had never stopped. They never would. The Valorians had just given them a new enemy. Then he pulled the trigger. Drain fell. The command center was taken, but the stellar lance was still charging. Ryan found the control panel and tried to shut it down, but the system was locked. Valen appeared at the door. He had escaped the Valorian ship and followed the human assault team. He ran to the control panel and entered his command codes. The charging sequence stopped, but the weapon was unstable. The energy that had been building needed to go somewhere. If they did not release it safely, the entire station would explode. Nicole Sanders was still outside, flying cover for the assault team. She heard Jake's transmission explaining the situation. Someone needed to stay behind and manually trigger the release. They would not survive. She did not hesitate. She flew her damaged ship directly into the Stellar Lance's primary exhaust port. Her ship wedged itself into the mechanism, giving the others time to escape. Then she activated her self-destruct. The explosion released the stored energy harmlessly into space. The Stellar Lance was destroyed. Nicole Sanders died a hero. The Valorian fleet, leaderless and broken, began to retreat. Some ships tried to fight. Most did not. They had never experienced defeat before. They did not know how to handle it. The war was over. Humanity had won. The cost was terrible. Billions had died. Cities were ruins. The planet would take decades to rebuild. But Earth was free, and it would stay free. In the weeks that followed, the Carrick's Dominions sent a formal alliance proposal. Other species, encouraged by humanity's victory, began reaching out. The Valorian collective retreated to their core systems. Their empire, shaken for the first time in millennia, Thyravos and Valen, stayed on Earth. They became ambassadors for a new Valorian faction that rejected the old ways. They helped humanity understand the galaxy and prepare for the challenges ahead. Captain Jake Morrison returned to his wife and daughter. He was called a hero, but he always said the real heroes were the ones who did not come home. Admiral Cruz retired. General Lawson took his place. Dr. Grant began building a galactic communication network. Dr. Clark kept inventing new technologies. And somewhere in the rebuilt cities of Earth, people looked up at the stars with new eyes. They had been prey. They had become hunters. The universe would never underestimate them again. And in the records of 100 worlds, a new story was told. The story of a small blue planet that had laughed in the face of extinction, fought against impossible odds, and roared back so loudly that the stars themselves trembled. Humanity was awake, and they were just getting started.